The pitch for decentralized social media goes something like this. No single corporation owns your data. No algorithm manipulates what you see. Your identity is portable. Your server can be yours, or a community's, or a friend's. The surveillance capitalism model of traditional social networks does not apply here, because there is no central operator sitting in the middle harvesting everything you do. Welcome to the Fediverse. Welcome to Nostr. Welcome to the protocols that were going to give us the internet we were promised. Much of that is true. The architectural differences are real. The improvements over centralized platforms are meaningful. And the ecosystems around Mastodon, Pleroma, Miskay, Lemmy, PeerTube, Matrix, Blue Sky's AT protocol, and Nostr have produced genuinely healthier patterns of online presence for millions of users. I do not want to talk anyone out of using these systems, but I want to be very clear about something that is getting lost in the enthusiasm. Decentralized does not mean anonymous. Federated does not mean private. And the IP address you are broadcasting to every server you interact with, every relay you publish to, every image you load, every user. Profile you view is a surveillance signal that the decentralized architecture, in many implementations, actually amplifies rather than reduces. Let me explain what I mean by that, because the claim may sound counterintuitive. Start with how a federated network actually works at the protocol level. When you have an account on a Mastodon instance, say, you interact with other users on other instances through a protocol called ActivityPub, which is a W3C standardized protocol for social networking activity. When you follow someone on another instance, your instance sends a follow request to their instance. When you post, your instance distributes the post to every instance where you have followers. When you view a remote user's profile, your client makes HTTP requests to that user's home instance to fetch their data. This fan-out pattern is the opposite of what a centralized service does. A centralized service keeps everything on its own infrastructure. Your client talks only to that one operator, one IP observation target, one contractual privacy relationship. The federated alternative, by design, spreads your activity across many servers, each of which observes some portion of what you do, each with its own privacy policy, its own jurisdiction, its own operator, its own logging practices. Think about what this looks like from the perspective of an instance operator. They see the IP addresses of every user who fetches any post on their server. They see which accounts those users look at. They see, through referrer headers and request patterns, which posts get clicked through. They see the user agent strings of every client. They see, in many default configurations, detailed access logs that could reconstruct a user's browsing pattern across the Fediverse. Now multiply that. Instead of one operator with that view, you have hundreds or thousands. A popular account you follow on a different instance means that instance sees every request your instance makes on your behalf. An image embedded in a post hosted on yet another instance means that instance logs the IP address of whoever loaded the image. A link preview generated by your instance means your instance's IP hits the linked website. A full trip through the Fediverse, across typical browsing, can touch dozens of distinct operators in a short session, each of whom now has a fragment of your activity keyed to your IP. Your home instance operator sees even more. They see your direct messages, which on most Fediverse platforms are not end-to-end encrypted. Mastodon's direct messages, specifically, are sent in the clear within the platform's database. The operator of your instance can read them. The operator of the recipient's instance, if they are on a different instance, can read them. Any subpoena or breach at either end exposes them. Let's talk about Nostr, because Nostr is a different model, and the IP exposure works differently. Nostr, which stands for notes and other stuff transmitted by relays, uses a cryptographic identity tied to a public-private key pair, not an account on a server. You sign your events with your private key. You publish them to relays, which are the servers that store and redistribute events. When you follow someone, your client subscribes to their events across whatever relays that person publishes to. When someone reads your events, their client connects to the relays where your events are stored and pulls them. Relays, therefore, see every client that connects to them. They see the IP addresses of readers. They see which public keys are being subscribed to, which means they see who is interested in whom. They see the timing of subscriptions, which can correlate with geographic patterns. They see which events are fetched, and from what IP. The identity in Nostr is the public key. If you use the same Nostr public key across multiple devices, your activity from each device connects to the same identity, and any relay operator who observes your traffic can correlate your home IP, your mobile IP, your coffee shop IP, and your hotel IP under one persistent cryptographic identity. Unlike a centralized service, where that correlation happens inside one company's database and is at least constrained by their privacy policy, in Nostr the correlation happens across a decentralized relay ecosystem where no consistent privacy policy exists. Every relay sets its own. Some log, some do not. You often cannot tell. Bluesky's AT protocol has a similar shape. Bluesky uses personal data servers that host your account data, and a relay that indexes the firehose of all public activity for discovery. When you interact with Bluesky, your IP touches your PDS and, for certain operations, the relay infrastructure. As Bluesky's federation matures, more independent operators will be involved. The point is not that Bluesky specifically is worse. The point is that the architecture, once again, distributes your IP across operators rather than concentrating it. None of this is hidden. It is not a scandal. It is the natural consequence of a decentralized architecture meeting the fundamental reality of TCP/IP, which is that every request carries the originating IP address as a basic requirement for the response to be delivered. What is underemphasized in the marketing is that IP addresses are a meaningful identity signal on their own. Your residential IP is often stable for weeks or months. Your mobile carrier's IP ranges are geolocatable to a region. Your workplace IP is shared across colleagues but identifiable by employer. A sufficiently motivated observer correlating your IP across Fediverse instances or across Nostr relays builds a profile. That profile does not need your real name to be useful. Law enforcement regularly works backward from an IP to an identity through subpoenas to ISPs. Commercial trackers correlate IPs across web services, stalkers, harassers, and abusive family. Members have used IP linkage to confirm identities of accounts they suspected were specific people. The decentralized social media platforms mostly do not solve this. Some specific mitigations exist, and it's worth describing them fairly. Mastodon supports authorized fetch mode, which requires remote servers to authenticate themselves before fetching content. This reduces some forms of third-party scraping, but does not fundamentally change the IP observation surface for legitimate federated interaction. Some instances run all outbound federation traffic through Tor, which obscures the instance's IP, but not the user's. Some users access their own instance through Tor, which obscures their IP to the instance operator, though hidden services interaction with the broader Fediverse is imperfect. Nostr clients increasingly support Tor for relay connections, which is a real mitigation and is the direction the privacy-conscious Nostr community has been pushing. If you connect to relays through Tor, the relay sees the Tor exit, not your real IP. If your client handles subscription patterns carefully, the timing correlation becomes harder. But most users do not run Nostr over Tor. Most users run it over their normal connection, and every relay they touch logs what it sees. For Matrix, which is a different kind of decentralized messaging protocol, end-to-end encryption is available and widely used, which is a substantial improvement over Mastodon-style direct messaging. But metadata, room memberships, timing, server federation patterns remains visible to the home servers involved. The Matrix.org team has published detailed analyses of the metadata visible to home servers, which is more than many users realize. The specific case of image and media handling deserves attention because it's a common privacy leak across Fediverse platforms. When a remote user posts an image, most Fediverse instances cache a copy of that image on their own infrastructure for their users to load. Good instances proxy all remote media through themselves, which means when you load an image from another instance, your IP hits only your home instance, not the source. Some instances, however, do not proxy, or proxy inconsistently. or allow direct loading of external URLs in posts. In those cases, loading a remote image sends your IP to whatever server hosts the image, which could be a third-party image host or the remote instance directly. This varies by client and server configuration and is often undocumented for end users. Link preview generation is another common leak. When a post contains a URL, many clients or servers automatically fetch the linked page to generate a preview card. If this fetch happens client-side, your IP hits the linked site. If it happens server-side, your instance's IP hits the linked site. But your instance now has a record of you having viewed that link at that time. The pattern here is that decentralization changed who sees your data, but did not make your data invisible. The surveillance of centralized platforms was concentrated and accountable, at least in the sense that one company was responsible. The surveillance of federated platforms is distributed and diffuse, which makes it harder to reason about, harder to regulate, and harder to opt out of in any meaningful way. What can you actually do if you want the benefits of these platforms without the IP exposure becoming an identity vector? Use Tor or a reputable VPN for platforms where IP exposure matters to your threat model. This is the largest single mitigation available. A VPN at least narrows the observer to your VPN provider, which is a single accountable party, rather than hundreds of instance operators. Tor is stronger, but comes with usability trade-offs, and some instances block or limit Tor access. Choose instances whose operators publish clear logging and retention policies. A small instance run by someone you trust is often better than a massive instance you know nothing about, but only if that operator is competent with security and has thought about these questions. Ask, read their rules. Look for a privacy policy that specifies log retention. For Nostr, rotate your keys periodically if your threat model warrants it, though this is an imperfect solution because your social graph often reconnects identities. Use separate keys for separate contexts. Run your own relay if you have the technical capacity. Understand that direct messages on most Fediverse platforms are not encrypted. If you need encrypted messaging, use a dedicated protocol, Signal for synchronous, Matrix with encryption enabled for group style, or XMPP with OMEMO for more technical users. Avoid loading external media and link previews when possible. Configure your client, if it allows, to disable automatic image loading and link preview generation. And recognize, above all, that privacy is not a property of a platform. It is a property of the full system that includes the platform, your network, your client, your behavior, and the operators you route through. Decentralization changes the distribution of that system. It does not automatically improve every axis of privacy, and in some axes, it worsens them. The promise of decentralized social media is real in ways that matter. You are not beholden to a single company's algorithm. Your identity can move. Your community can set its own norms. These are genuine goods. But the promise that decentralization delivers privacy, specifically as a package deal with the other benefits, is a promise that the protocols themselves do not make and cannot keep. The IP address you broadcast to every server you touch is an old, unglamorous, protocol-level identifier that predates every one of these platforms and will outlast all of them. Pretending otherwise, in the glow of finally leaving the big platforms behind, is the kind of mistake that exposes the people who trusted the pitch without reading the packets.